Hey everybody, so look, I'm not in some dark, depressing basement today. So today I am at Workhive. It's a co-working space that I've been working at for the last 2 or 3 months. It's been an awesome place to work, and I'm just using one of the side rooms here to record this YouTube video today. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience in the video game industry. Uh, so 7 of the last 12 years I spent basically doing concept art for video games. And I learned a lot of interesting lessons during that time. And so today I want to talk about 10 things I learned from working in the video game business. All right, let's get started here. Like I was saying, I've spent a lot of the last 12 years, most of my professional career working in video games, doing concept art for video games. Most of that was split between two studios, EA Salt Lake and Disney Interactive, aka Avalanche Software in Salt Lake City. And so I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but also learned some valuable lessons. And even though I eventually decided to move on from making video games, I still think that the lessons I learned there are totally valuable, and I wouldn't have given up the experience for anything else. So I wanted to share some of those experiences today, and maybe they can be helpful for you as you start your career in games, or maybe they'll make you decide to avoid making video games altogether. Um, we'll see. But let me jump in, and we'll talk about some of these things I learned, and um, I guess how I learned to focus on the stuff that really matters when it comes to making art and making video games. So, number one for me in the list, and this isn't in order of importance of lesson. This is just number of lessons. Number one is that fancy offices are bullshit. So you'll see a lot of game studios with elaborate postmodern art, neon waterfalls, glowing logos, and all this stuff that's really built to impress. But honestly, none of this stuff is going to help you make games. So at both the studios that I worked at, I experienced a studio move kind of halfway through working at the studios. Um, and in both cases, we went to these very functional, um, kind of vanilla, unsexy offices. In the case of EA, it was kind of just kind of a uninteresting office, nothing super interesting, but nothing too offensive. In the case of Disney, the offices, our first offices, were a little bit more interesting. I always kind of compared it to Hogwarts. It was just like this labyrinth, really hard to find your way around, especially when I was first working there. It was spread across multiple floors. There's all these things that didn't work. I remember there's this like electrical cabinet that I would walk by, and it just all the time, it wasn't like because it was being fixed, it always had just like a big fan, like a fan you would grab like at Walmart, just like not like an industrial fan. I always had this fan like blowing into this, the doors open, and there was always this fan blowing into this like industrial cabinet. So it was a little more beat up and run down and kind of patched together as an office. Then the original EA office was just kind of a little bit more like a blah office. But you know, those offices were where I had my best experiences at both of those companies. I did the work I was the proudest of, and I saw really how a good studio functioned without the fancy offices. And then, kind of halfway through my experience at both studios, there was an office move, which was a ton of fun. And we ended up moving offices, and the new offices looked really fancy. In the case of EA, I think the new offices for EA were actually worse to work in. They were just more cramped. There was worse lighting, and the whole layout just didn't make sense. But they were more impressive. They had big fancy signs and a nice entrance and all this other stuff. In the case of Disney, I think the new offices for Disney were much better thought out, um, and laid out. But it didn't have to do so much with the impressive stuff. It wasn't about the big sign and nice carpets and glass doors that you walk through. It was a good office because it really functioned on it being a functional office that had the resources you need to get your work done. So along the same lines, number two thing I learned working in games is that fun offices are bullshit. And this kind of is along the same line. Things like cereal bars, in-office arcades, ping pong tables, fitness classes. And there's all these things that, an office, a studio may offer that I feel just kind of blurs the line between workspace and the rest of your life. You know, when I go to office, the best I can hope for is a big desk with a powerful computer and a big Cintiq. Outside of that, nothing else is really going to help me be better at creating art. I mean, there are questions of what's the best layout. Do you want cubicles? Do you want bullpen? And I've got all my own opinions on that, and that's not an easy question to answer. But all the other stuff to kind of make it look fun, slides and beanbag chairs and Nerf guns, that isn't what makes a good office, and it isn't what makes a place a good place to work. So discriminate between what resources a studio can offer to actually help you do your work versus stuff intended to give your office the appearance of fun. Um, Personally, I want to work at the office and I want to go have fun someplace else. Number three, people and culture make great games. So a studio is more than the sign on its door. The chemistry, the relationships, and values are really what drives great work. And actually, as a side note, the doors of EA Salt Lake, of this recording, they're going to be closing soon. They're closing down the studio, but the relationships that made the studio great, like, still exist. Those people, those working relationships, those teams, they went on to other studios and other places, and they're still making great games out there. So it isn't the studio itself, it isn't the brand that made the great teams. It's the people, it's the way they work together, it's the values they had that make the great teams. So don't confuse the brand with the great team. Number four, and this is going to start getting into the lessons I learned about actual making of games. And I'm not going to go too deep in this because I wasn't a game designer, but I did learn a couple of important lessons, I think, about the actual making of games. First and foremost, what makes a great game is great gameplay. So being a concept artist, I was involved in a lot of pitches, and a lot of these pitches were creating art to kind of show off the concept of the game. This is how cool it's going to look. And I found that the pitches that I did the most work on were the least successful pitches. And is that because they did poor work? Well, my work could have been crappy, but that wasn't really the reason. The real reason was that the best pitches were the pitches that focused on gameplay. And if you could sell an interesting gameplay, then that's what you really needed to build a game on. I think when you try to sell a game just on beautiful images, you're really fighting an uphill battle because a game is not based on the beautiful image, it's based on its gameplay. So worrying about the sexy stuff before you figure out what a game is really a waste of time. So, no one cares how the game looks if the game itself is going to be boring. Along those same lines, I am a fierce, fierce believer in this concept. So this is number five. The purpose of art in games is to support the gameplay. The best game makers absolutely know this. And if you really pay attention to great games, you'll see this in the way it's carried out is just so elegant and beautiful. When you have art aligned with gameplay, it makes for a really sublime experience. And this is a lesson that I think I really have carried on with me outside of games because it really applies to everywhere else you may choose to make art. So I just am a strong believer that art always has a purpose beyond just the art itself, beyond just looking beautiful. And if you can understand that purpose, and if you can understand that your art is in service of that purpose, I think it helps you to make much more successful art. So, purpose of art in games is to support the gameplay. Lesson number six. Am I on number six? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Lesson number six. Studios have to make money. So it's really easy when you're an idealistic young artist to come into video games and expect people to really get excited about great ideas and to sacrifice everything to get a great idea out the door. Unfortunately, that's not how it works most of the time. To be fair, I worked with pretty large studios, so this may have been more of the case in the large studios. But I have a feeling it's probably the case in smaller studios as well. Studios have to make money, and at some point that vision, a grand vision, is going to be compromised by finances. And this is just a reality of making games. And you can bemoan this, or you can accept it and try to find all of the sneaky ways you can to get great art into a game. Also, as a side note, don't believe it when a studio tells you it's about anything else than making money. A lot of studios like to cover up making games as, oh, we're in the business of making people happy, or saying our values are boldness, or we want work-life balance. That is not the value of any studio. The value and the purpose of any studio is to make money, and they will compromise all of those other things when it comes to balancing out books. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. You don't have to be cynical about that. Just be aware of it. Don't try to fool yourself that they're about anything else, and that'll just help you keep your expectations much more in line. So maybe someday you'll have a game studio that'll come along, and they will be a B Corp and really be dedicated to other artistic values. And if that happens, please give me a call. I'd love to check out that studio. But for right now, studios have to make money, so keep that in mind. Um, let's see, lesson number 7: appreciate good people. So the best thing that can happen in games is to work with an amazing team on an inspiring project. Working with an amazing team is really not that uncommon. I had the privilege of doing that a lot. Working on an inspiring project is pretty rare. But don't take for granted how awesome it is to work with a great team. And a lot of times, working with a great team can really turn around a project that may seem otherwise uninspired. One of the best experiences I had in this regard was working at EA, and I think the teams I work with at EA were really great in this regard, as they could take ideas that seemed somewhat uninspiring and really find an interesting spin on it and an interesting take on it, and turn it into an inspiring project. The one I think of the most is when we had the chance to develop a Monopoly project. Monopoly seems like it could be kind of an inspiring project, or kind of limited in what you do with it. But what our team ended up doing, what I thought was really, really interesting and really fun. We ended up doing Monopoly Streets, which we basically turned the Monopoly board into a city street, and you were moving around the street as you played the game. And I thought it was just a very interesting take on it visually, a lot of fun, and it was a great example of amazing people taking a concept and making an amazing concept out of it. So appreciate good people. Number 8. Or is this 9? No, this is number 8. Yeah. Don't confuse size with stability. And I would really say don't ever trust in stability when it comes to making video games. The larger a studio is, in a lot of ways, the more vulnerable it is. A big studio has a lot of operating expenses. They have to pay the salaries of lots of people. I mean, my last 2 gigs, EA and Disney, both had hundreds of employees. And you really have to hit home runs, and you really have to make sure that your projects are making money to be able to justify, paying all these wages. Small studios, I mean, they can still be open to failure and to shutting down, but small studios can weather failure a little bit better in some regards. They can have a game not do well and still be able to cover expenses. But the truth is, no studio is ever free from the risk of closure and layoffs, and I would be very skeptical of any studio or any job that gives you impression that they are giving you stability. I have just seen nothing but studio closures and layoff after layoff being in the game industry. So it's just part of the business. Don't confuse size with stability. Number 9. Loyalty to coworkers is more important than loyalty to a company. And this is extremely important to remember. Coworkers will repay loyalty, a company won't. The company is going to lay people off, but it's your colleagues that will help you find new work. So, support your team, but do it for the guys and gals in the trench for you. And know which side you're on when there are conflicts between workers and the company, and that does happen. It can be really easy to think, I need to show loyalty to the company, I got to show them I'm a team player, but sometimes you can end up hurting your other fellow employees by doing so. And the other thing to remember is that companies will come and go, but your colleagues will be around for a long, long time. And I've seen that within my lifetime. Like I said, EA is closing down. I saw Disney close down. But all these people that I worked with at these different companies, they're still working together. They're still supporting each other, and they're still trying to make it work. So, be loyal to company. Sorry, don't be loyal to people, not the companies. People will repay it. The company won't. And the last one, my number 10, is to do your best work in bad situations. Um, and I got to kind of be honest that I've probably been one of the people that's had the worst attitude ever in games. So this is really one of these lessons that I wish I could send back in a time machine, give to myself before I started games. But I definitely bemoaned not working in ideal artistic situations. And if I could go back and give myself some advice, it would be that, you know what, you're never going to work in an ideal situation, but you'll never be ashamed of doing good work. So, sometimes you work with a jerk. Sometimes the project you're working on is horrible. Sometimes your hands hurt, your desk is too small, the AC in the office is too cold, but do your best work. You're going to learn and grow regardless, and at the end of the day, you can be proud of the work you did and the time you spent in that studio. So, that's my list of 10 things I learned from working in games. I know it's kind of depressing. I worked 7 years in games and I only learned 10 lessons, but I hope that they are somewhat useful to you. Um, if you have any comments, any thoughts, please leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear your insights as well. If you worked in video games, tell me what you think. If you disagree with some of my thoughts, I'm happy to hear that as well. But if you found this video useful, please like it. Please subscribe and check out more videos like this. And that's it, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.